Welcome to True Wellness with Dr. D, the podcast where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. D, and each week I'll bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to True Wellness with Dr. D. Imagine if there was a remedy to heal anxiety, life's overwhelms, and bring us connected to the world and ourselves. That, my friends, is the remedy that we are going to talk about specifically today. So I am excited to be joined here today by Maureen Calamia, who is not only an amazing feng shui practitioner and an earth energy healer, but I have recently had the honor of reading her new book, The Enchanted Earth, which touches upon exactly what I just spoke about. So welcome, Maureen. We're so glad to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I know everyone's ears have perked up. They're like a remedy for all of this stuff. And it's for free remedy. Imagine that.
Absolutely. Just our souls, our whole body, from our physical body all the way to our spiritual body is so benefited by being out in the natural world.
Yes, well, I'm excited to dive into that today. You know, I recently did a TED Talk that was really on the power of connection, and the power of connecting with ourselves and listening to our inner voice. And one of the things that really struck me with your book is we can't really be connected with ourselves if we are not connected with the outside world, if we are not connected to nature, if we are not connected to earth. Because I know for me, and you guys, Maureen's book is filled with all of these wonderful stories of connection with nature and the profound experiences that they allow people. And as I reflected reading the book, I'm like, my gosh, it's like some of those big aha moments in life have come when I'm outside, sitting in nature, contemplating whatever it is that I'm contemplating. And there's so much power in that. So talk to us, Maureen. First of all, give us an overview of your book. And then let's talk about what inspired you to even go on this journey.
Oh, great. So, yeah, I mean, I think you summarized it pretty well with what you said. It's a collection of really like sacred stories or sacred experiences from a variety of people, from architects to park rangers to shamans, best-selling authors, psychologists. It's just a really wonderful spectrum of people that I admire. And I approached and said, would you have a story to share? And I got like resounding yes, and so many of them from most people. And it was just a joyful process of hearing these stories and how these experiences in nature moved them in some way, either shifted their perspective about a challenge in their life, a relationship, or maybe a health challenge, or it kind of, some of them are really kind of like a supernatural, we would say supernatural experience that kind of opened them to more of the consciousness and sentience of the natural world. So really amazing experiences, from seeing an amazing sunrise to, having a conversation with a mountain.
Which sounds really silly, but the truth is, like, I have the best conversations out with nature ever, right?
Yeah. So So, wow, how was I inspired? Probably about 15 years ago or so, more. I read a book called The Last Child in the Woods by Richard
Mm.
Louv. And just the title of that book, I just was, I have to read it. And I immediately went to the library and picked it up and read it. And in that book is a term that Richard Louv coined called nature deficit disorder.
Hmm.
And to me, it made so much sense, and it really kind of encapsulated how I felt about this disconnection
Yes.
that humanity has really separated from this divine, beautiful relationship with all of nature, that we're in the soup of nature. We can't get out of it. We're part of it. Yet we've somehow figured out a way to separate ourselves through, you know, immersion in technology and the mental mind and the busyness and the stress of our everyday lives. So this really it it inspired me to really kind of sink into that concept at a deeper level. And I, at that time, I realized something about my purpose was going to be connected to this. But I had the book in my mind for all that time. And it was actually during COVID, sitting under this majestic oak tree with a dear friend of mine. And she said, we were talking about work, and I was actually feeling very frustrated by a number of attempts to do things and something new. I always love to do new things. And every attempt at these new projects was failing. And it was like I was trying that. No, that wasn't it. I was trying this. No. And then suddenly, sitting there under this tree, it was if there was a wash of this golden light energy from the top down over my body that gives you that sensation of chills, right? It's
Yes.
overwhelmed with this but beautiful energy. And the concept of this book just dropped into my head, a remembrance of something that I said years ago, that I would eventually write this book. I knew, I was like, I have to do that now. And it was just beautiful, because I was out in nature. I was looking for guidance, and it was actually an example that I could use in my book to share at the beginning of the book. Like these are the types of things that we may kind of disregard.
Yeah.
These just beautiful experiences.
Yes. Yes. So nature deficit disorder, I mean, I think that's a really big topic because like you said, we have become so disconnected. And I think, Maureen, I think we haven't even come to the point where we've acknowledged what a critical impact that has on our life in all different areas. And I know that you talk about it, especially in the beginning of your book, where you're talking about, okay, well, we've got this nature deficit disorder and it impacts our mood, it impacts our quality of life, it impacts our physical well-being as well.
Mhm.
I mean, what have you learned from your research?
Yeah, I mean, I have been a student of depth psychology and eco psychology for many years. And I'm always craving to learn about our experience and our connection um, with our inner selves.
Yes.
And it was pretty clear to me in doing this work and study and interviewing people that when we are disconnected
Mhm.
from the outside world, it is really a reflection of being disconnected inside in our inner world.
Mhm.
And you mentioned this earlier too. And I think this nature deficit disorder is just a mirror reflection of all the anxiety, stress, depression, feeling of not belonging or feeling adrift in life that so many people have. And as we learn about this concept of energy and consciousness, whatever we feel on a soul level is going to eventually impact us on a physical level.
Yes.
Goes through all the layers, a spiritual level, emotional, mental, and then it manifests in the 3D world
Yeah.
in physical ailments. So it is something that, and I'm not going to say, disclaimer, obviously, that if you have some physical issues, start going outside and magically you're going to be healed. It's a process. It's a process of inner reflection and learning about who we are,
Mhm.
learning who we are at an authentic level, but also what lights us up.
Yeah.
Where do we find joy in life? What are we passionate about? And kind of breaking out of the mold of a box that many of us find ourselves in
Exactly.
in our careers, in our relationships. So I see this work as a wonderful extension on my practice of feng shui, which I started like 20 years ago. So it's just, I think it's a natural progression.
I love that. I love that. I know I'm looking at your book here. I've opened it up to something that I have earmarked that I think is really important. And in the book, you talk about, the indigenous cultures and their connection with the earth, and how connecting with our land in an intimate way is a vital part of healthy living. And we must acknowledge and care for the land as she cares for us. And I think this is important. I know you gave a disclaimer, like we can't just go out on earth and everything gets healed, but we actually even do have science that shows that when we get out barefoot, grounded, on the earth, we bring down that inflammation, almost immediately that comes down. And that is very powerful, very, very powerful.
Absolutely. Our blood pressure drops, the production of cortisol,
Yes.
all of these indicators on a physical level are showing us that this intimate connection with the land, even just on a physical level, is definitely impacting our physical bodies. And if I love to say, uh, there's different ecotherapies like forest bathing, and they are proponents of all of those wonderful research findings. But I believe that if we approach those experiences in nature with greater consciousness and mindfulness, we can actually soak in that beautiful, frequency of nature. The Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz, is what our bodies resonate with in general. Um, there's different frequencies within our body, I know, and you could probably talk to that much
Yes.
better than I. But kind of the overall frequency of the planet is this 7.83 hertz that it puts our body back into coherence. And I think the more mindful we are, we're soaking that up even more.
Yeah, so I think it's long been known that the Earth's frequencies actually impact us. If any of us goes and we stand and we look at a beautiful lake or the beautiful ocean or the mountains, it's like automatically we have that sense of awe, right? That sense of magnificence. And not only that, but a sense of who we are in that space, right? We're like, wow, God, we're a part of this amazing world.
It's such a, I guess, ironic thing that all at once we feel part of it all, right? This oneness, non-duality with all of what exists. And at the same time, we get a sense of who we are at a deeper level. It's really pretty enchanted or magical.
Yes, like the Enchanted Earth, because the Earth is enchanted. No play on words there. You know, I think this is important too, because like you said earlier, we have become a society where we are so disconnected, right? We're on our phones out all the time. We are always moving, moving, moving. It's like information, or the access to information that we have these days is incredible. And yet it puts us into this hyper drive. I'm gonna another, on page 61 of your book, you said, in fact, I realized that being in do mode prevents connection. And connection happens when we are open and patient, when we wait and watch for the spark of electricity, resonance, and symbols to flow or not. And you're telling the story here, and Kathleen says, when you are moved, you can move others. And that line just struck me as so powerful, because when we're disconnected, we're just not in touch with anything. And I feel like as a society, as a culture, as people, and just working with clients, I see this all the time. We're all looking for those magical moments of when we're moved, when we're touched, when we're inspired. And our world, the way we live today with this connection, it's missing.
Yeah. And I do feel that is a significant part of where we are on today's planet.
Mm-hmm.
It is a significant contributor to the chaos of what we see in the outside world, because we're just not feeling that belonging, and for many people, it's hard to feel those elevated emotions of curiosity and wonder and compassion and love.
Yeah.
And those emotions are available to us so much more readily in the outside world than if we're sitting indoors and scrolling on our phones.
Yes, which is the new norm, of course. I know that there are days, so, my practice has moved to 100% remote. And so there are days when I'm like, oh my gosh, I have not stepped foot outside. And I'm like, this is crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and you can feel it, like I can feel in my body, like, oh my gosh, I haven't had the sun touch my face today. I haven't had my feet touch the ground. Like I haven't been outside in the air. And that has an impact just on, for me personally, like it impacts my mood. It impacts my energy levels. It impacts even those physiological things, not just the insights of stress and feeling higher levels of stress, but even feeling more fatigue in the body itself.
Yes, absolutely. And when we step outside, it can be just a simple, looking at the clouds in the sky. That's what everyone has access to that.
Yes.
They may not have access to trees, but just looking up into the sky. And I'm one of those people who love clouds. So, I love stormy days, like when a storm is approaching. I'm weird, I guess, but I just have a real affinity to the weather. And just being able to see what's going on there, what's approaching. There's another level of this connection to nature that is very, I think it's very tied to our feeling of being truly human, is this level of metaphor.
Yeah.
The natural world speaks to us in metaphor very often.
Yes.
And we can understand our lives so much better when we're in relationship with the natural world, like seeing the seasons in the northern climates, where right now we have deciduous trees that are bare and the leaves are all on the ground, and you get a sense of, oh, this is a cycle. you're reminded that everything is in this cycle, and every being is in sync with this. And it reminds us to get in sync with it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
to remember that now, as we're, in this darker time of the year, it is natural for us to kind of go within more, to be less active, to, kind of pay attention to the rhythms of our daily lives. And it's really an important thing to connect with, because we are so disconnected through our 24-hour cycle of news and video games and TV and lighting, and you don't need to have a quote unquote normal day. Our days are turned upside down. So
They are. And that's all part of that being out of sync, I think, right? Like just being out of sync with nature. I always tell our clients, one of the best things that you can do for your health is like in the morning, as the sun is rising, get outside barefoot, go face the direction of the sun, and just get connected, just get present, ground yourself, let that light come in, reset your body's entire cycle.
right, yes. And the beauty of that is, you don't have to do that for an hour. A few minutes every day. I think one of the biggest obstacles for people to doing anything that's more of a spiritual nature, like meditation and quiet reflection, is people say, I don't have time for that. But really, even if you do a few minutes a day, it's better than nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In those moments, we can literally change our physical, mental, emotional well-being with just a couple minutes, right? Just really getting grounded, literally grounded outside, but grounded in our bodies as well. And when we are in nature and connected to the earth, it makes that so much easier.
Yes.
Yeah. Maureen, tell me about some of the surprising things that you learned or discovered in writing your book, Enchanted Earth.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I mentioned before, I love to do research. I love to kind of have hypotheses and check it out. I've got that scientific nature within me. And I have to say that there were some really surprising things. One was, I was going to this subset of the population that I deemed to have more likelihood of these stories in their background, right? So I was going to people that, like I said before, shamans. I was going to people who write about nature, people who work in architecture, but in a subset of architecture called biophilic design, which is about bringing the outdoors inside. So these were all people that I kind of cherry picked and asked
Yes.
to participate. And and of course they said yes, right? So they showed up, and here I am on Zoom with them, kind of recording just a casual conversation so that I could write it up for the book. And I was surprised that some of the people that showed up, when I asked them, so what nature story do you want to share with me? What profound, moving experience in nature? They kind of looked at me and were like, I don't know. I don't know if I have one.
Wow.
And I was like, that's interesting. So then as we were talking, they would bring up, a certain group of these people would bring up a story in nature. That was pretty cool. But I found them recounting the story from more of a mental perspective.
Okay.
And when I tried to ask them a little bit deeper to kind of get that deeper, juicier experience, there seemed to be like, a shield. Like, and I'm doing this because they were protecting their heart in a way. They were, I believe, a fear of feeling vulnerable,
Yeah.
to sharing a story that really got to something that was moving to
Yes.
them. So there was this reluctance, I guess, among some of the people. I can't say for sure that means all of the people in that group were doing that, but I kind of intuited that was going on. Some of the people may not have had that deeper connection. And that was interesting too, to even contemplate that.
Yeah.
So there was that I thought was really surprising. Another thing that really kind of stunned me and also made me realize how important this book is. I heard some super moving stories from people that some of them brought me to tears,
Mm.
chills like I'm getting right now because I'm kind of in that mode of these really heart-centered experiences. And after having this conversation, the person would say to me, this is the first time I've told anybody
Yeah.
this experience.
Beautiful.
And I was so shocked the first time I heard that. I went, how could that be? This is such an amazing, beautiful story that if it moved me, how many other people could it move? And oh my gosh, isn't that what we need? Isn't that what we need to stir open what's going on with our separated, dysfunctional, chaotic hearts? Don't we need more of this? Don't we need more of this to just open us up? And also the realization came to me that if it moves me and moves others, they may also recall a story that they've actually, I say story, but an experience that they've had.
Yes.
And that will even bring them up to another level
Yes.
of opening and reflection. So that probably was the most significant thing that I discovered in doing these interviews, is that so often people have these experiences that they may think are too fantastical to share, again, because of vulnerability,
Yes.
of being termed a kook, and all the other words you want to, throw in there by society, that we kind of keep that guard up. But I was so lucky that those people were open and felt, I guess, trusting enough with me and with my project,
Yeah.
and were able to share it.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. We live in a world, especially with social media and everything else, where there is a lot of judgment, and we don't take enough time to acknowledge our own feelings, emotions, thoughts, and experiences, right? Recognizing that this is part of the value and the beauty and in life itself. I remember not too long ago, a couple months ago, I was at a work event in Sundance, and I went out for my morning run, and there's no one else around. I'm in the middle of the forest by myself, and there was just this tree, and it just called, right? Like it just called, and I just had to go and put my hands on this tree, and I stopped in my path. I took my sneakers off. I got my feet on the ground, and I just connected with the tree. And like you said, it's like this most magical experience. It was within just seconds, I just found myself in complete, utter tears from the beauty and the magnificence and that connection with the earth, right? And Yeah, like maybe it's strange for people to hear that story, but I think when we all connect to those experiences that we have had out in nature, when we've truly allowed ourselves to, right? So it's not just being vulnerable as we tell the stories, it's about being vulnerable to allow ourselves to experience those things.
Yeah. Yeah, that is another part of it. You know, these deep emotions are often locked inside of our hearts. And, sometimes we're just afraid to go there because we don't know. It's like a Pandora's box. We open that heart, what's going to come out? We can't, control it. And I think that is one of the reasons um, that people tend to be very closed when it comes to that. And I just love part of your experience. I think you spontaneously followed what your message was.
Absolutely.
Nature was going, hey, hey, over here.
Yes.
You just were like, you know, you didn't brush it off and just continue on your run. You actually acknowledged it,
Hmm.
stopped, you approached it, you engaged with it, and you were blessed by it, right?
Yeah. 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 It is a blessing. But I don't think it's unique, right? We all have access to these experiences if we just allow ourselves that vulnerability.
Yes, yes. One thing that is it's so silly, but the term tree hugger, right? We were all tree huggers at one time. And now that term is, some people use it as a slur, right? Oh, she's a tree hugger, and we laugh. And it's not a common thing to go into on a trail and just to go up and hug a tree, because I think part of us are like, oh, somebody's going to see me hugging a tree and think I, lost it. And then you could just imagine people going by seeing you hugging this tree. Um, it is so interesting that experiences like a forest bathing walk or a retreat, say, in nature, that helps people connect to nature. When people are told, okay, go and look for a tree and hug it, we're craving that permission to do it. It's
Yes, we
like,
are now.
I think that is one of the reasons for the success as forest bathing walks, is
Sure.
that people are like, I'm going to be with a group of people. It'll be okay to hug a tree. No one's going to think bad of me, and, doing it as a community effort. Um, we really do crave that connection on a deep level, although we may just kind of unconsciously subvert that and just push it down.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, right? Because there are so many things that I think, intuitively sense and know. And we've come, again, I think this comes from all the disconnection. We just kind of brush it off versus coming into real connection with, okay, that tree just asked me to stop. Well, that sounds bizarre, but that tree just asked me to stop. And I think it is about just recognizing that we are one with nature. And just as we communicate with one another, nature is always communicating with us, and we are always communicating with nature. I mean, there are so many different studies and research that has taken place that proves this, right? Like where they've taken plants and they've had two sets of plants, and one where they've given positive communication to the plant, one where they've given negative communication to the plant, and it has an impact on how that plant actually grows.
Yes, yes. As an extension of that, so think about like I don't know, 100-foot majestic pine, right? So one of I have a podcast with the same name, The Enchanted Earth, and one of the people I interviewed for it just recently, he builds tree houses. He's the tree house master. If anyone has seen that show on Animal Planet, the Treehouse Master. So this was before, he was doing it full time, and he was just helping a friend, and they climbed up and they had all this rigging, and they're getting up into this tree that they're going to build a treehouse on his friend's property. And he said that they encountered so many challenges, like the ropes were getting hung up and the equipment wasn't working right. And he said he felt this sense of they were not welcome. And he really felt it. It wasn't just all this, but this physical reality of having issues with their equipment was just adding to it.
Yes.
And he said over the course of time, they were getting higher and higher in the tree. And he said he suddenly was looking at this, moss that was growing on this tree for, decades or almost a century perhaps, and marveling at the way the branches were and the nests in there and the wildlife that is, using this beautiful tree to live. And his whole demeanor changed. And he was in like gratitude mode and awe
Beautiful.
and wonder and just, wow, I'm probably the first human to ever be up here this high in this tree. And he said suddenly everything shifted. It was this awe, this respect, this kind of feeling of reciprocity from his heart. I cannot explain it any other way. I'm paraphrasing him, but he said everything shifted, and then it was effortless, and they were, enjoying the tree. They were working as a symbiotic relationship together instead of like conflict. So it really is true. We are dialoguing with a tree without even realizing it. And trees can feel our, ill intentions too, or lack of really. They didn't have an ill intention, but I think there was not an opening to dialogue with the tree in a unconscious way.
Yeah. What do you know that documentary? There is a documentary that certainly changed and transformed my understanding of nature and trees and their connection. I'm trying to remember what the name is. It is a documentary about essentially the trees. They're all connected and all underground. And they actually did some research where unfortunately, they injected the tree with something, but they were able to follow its communication pathway. Is it The Secret Lives of Trees?
Well, maybe there's several books that talk about this: the mother tree, the hidden life of trees, and more. But yes, that mycelium network underground that connects trees, and they, rather than being competitors, it's more like a family, right? So if one tree gets infected with some kind of invasive species, other trees send chemicals to try to help, to ward it off. And it's just really a wonderful relationship. I mean, I think of all like beings of nature as humans, I think we can really understand trees better because they're almost like us, right? They have this verticality, they're reaching up to the heavens, they're grounded into the earth.
Yes.
They are channeling energy just like we are.
Yes.
Every single one of us on this planet. And so I think we really, we have a very close identity with trees.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me personally, even just in those moments where maybe I can't be outside, And I need to like bring myself into a better space. My visualization for my own grounding, for my own meditation is I start where I walk into this beautiful field that has all these beautiful purple flowers, and there's a beautiful waterfall, and there's this great majestic tree. And I sit down next to this tree with my back up against its bark. And I just literally like connect, like visualize like my energy coming from my rear straight into the ground, going all the way down to Mother Earth. And that just being my grounding. And even just that nature visualization alone brings me into a completely different space.
I love that. I'm sure in your workshops you do a meditation to try to bring people back to center, right? And it's interesting because if you don't lead them to a specific place, if you allow people to just go to a place where they feel calm and peace and get grounded, like 99% of people are going to pick a place in nature.
Yes.
Because that is where we intuitively know we can reconnect and reconnect with our breath and with our still point.
Yeah, I love that. So from your book and all the interviews that you've done, what's your favorite story? Are you allowed to have a favorite? What's your favorite story today? How's that?
Oh, wow. That's hard. I have to say that it was one of my last interviews, and it was with actually a dear friend of mine who is a wildlife rehabilitator at Sweetbriar Nature Center in Smithtown, New York. Her name is Janine, and I've been friends with Janine for almost 20 years. So I finally got her to sit down to do an interview, and I just, sometimes when I interview people, I ask them about a childhood experience in nature and what was your childhood like. And she brought up this story of caring for the animals in her neighborhood. Okay, that's not too crazy, right? She would take any injured animals back to her home, to her yard, and she'd build them a shelter.
Oh.
She would feed them and she would give them water, and sometimes they lived and sometimes they didn't.
Yeah.
So she would bury them. She would do a very intentional, like a whole burial ceremony out of respect for the animal. And she said one time she buried a bird. I can't remember what type, but a small bird, say a sparrow. And she put the bird in the ground, and then she covered it over with some dirt, and then she tapped her foot on the top. And she heard like a song come out of the dirt, and she went, "Oh my God, maybe it's not dead." And she uncovered it, and it was dead. So she covered it over and tapped her foot down, and she got it again. And she thought, as a child, that this bird was telling her thank you. And that story was just so beautiful. And then it was as if she said, I haven't thought about that time of my childhood and those experiences. I haven't thought of them in years. And I said, okay, so interesting, that foreshadows what you're doing now. And she just sat there. It was like, oh my gosh, like I had no connection between what I experienced as a child, what I did then, and what I do now. It's my life's calling. And of course, for many of us in between, she had a totally different career. She was an artist, and she did all sorts of beautiful art.
Oh.
But then she came to Sweetbriar in her 40s, and she's been with it ever since. But just really magical how a lot of our stories of childhood really are foreshadowing our calling in life.
It's so true.
So that just kind of comes to my mind, and I thought that was really magical. That was just so cool to see that.
Yeah, I love that. Oh gosh. Gosh, what I love about the stories and about your book is, and you touched on it a little bit much earlier in our conversation here, is the stories are what bring us together, right? And the stories are what allow us to reconnect even to our own selves, right? Like as we read the stories in your book, in The Enchanted Earth, and we hear or read, right? As we journey along with the story, it allows us to make all the connections to all of our stories in our own lives. And there's so much power in that because there are things that maybe we didn't realize at the time were the messages that were coming through that now we can reflect and be like, oh my gosh, right?
Yes, that yes. Thank you for bringing that up. The power of these stories can be really immense in our current lives. So one of the things that I recognized, I started out with childhood memories. That was kind of my thought. And then I kind of evolved when I started writing it and just shifted to any experience, could be from childhood or adulthood. And, but something about childhood made me pause because I am not one of those people. I'm very intuitive. I would never call myself psychic, but psychic just means you have a connection to your intuition, right? But the word is very loaded, so I just kind of feel like, well, I'm not like a professional psychic. But, so many people that have had meaningful stories have had tremendous experiences as a child, talking to fairies in the garden and, feeding the animals and connecting and talking with them, or just really really magical. And I think we so often dismiss that as imaginal. When our
Yes.
imagination is really a portal to the spiritual realm, to our
Yes.
creativity, to our authentic selves, right?
Yes.
But when I reflected on my own personal stories in childhood, I didn't have those types of stories. I didn't have any of that. And I really was at a loss for a while, like, what childhood experiences did I have? And I sat down one day just with my journal, and I reflected on that. And I suddenly had a remembrance of a story that was always in my conscious mind. But looking through the lens of writing about these profound nature stories, I found so much more depth and like a true, beautiful, sacred experience of nature
Yes.
as an 11-year-old girl. And the more I wrote about it, the more was coming up about the synchronicities, the metaphor. It was really an amazing process. And I realized that for some of us, we need to sit down with a journal and
Sure.
write about these stories that we know we had,
Yes.
but there's magic in them. There is something so much deeper. I like to it's a term called personal mythology. It's not the Greek and Roman mythology and the Norwegian mythology that we are familiar with. It's our own personal mythology, our own archetypes, our own metaphor. And within that is a seed to who we really are at an authentic level and what our purpose or calling is in this life. So
Yes.
there's so much that we can get from these beautiful stories.
Yeah, there are. I love that. So, Maureen, as we begin to wrap up here, I always ask everybody the same question. What are 3 actionable things that our listeners can take on after listening to this podcast?
Okay, well, let me start with what I just said. Sit down with a journal and really just, just, if you're having trouble thinking of a story, just sit there and write 5 experiences that just pop to your mind about being in nature. It could be an encounter with wildlife. It could be an amazing storm that rolled through your area. A beautiful sunrise or sunset that really touched you. Just write it really quick, and then sit there with the 5 stories and see which one wants to be reflected on more deeply. And then write. Just write. Just allow yourself to write whatever comes up, and give yourself that kind of free time of writing and reflection, and see what might arise. Get out into nature.
Yes.
That's number 2. And I just wrote a post about 6 steps to talking with a tree, and then I said, well, really, there really aren't 6 steps to talking to a tree. We just have to remember some things, and that's like anybody can do it at any time. Don't have any preconceived notions of what your communication is going to be like. There may not be a voice booming out of the tree. It might be a squirrel that scampers up the tree that has meaning for you in that moment. Just be open to it. Yeah, so get out into nature, be spontaneous, approach it with that childlike wonder and play and lightness, like nothing has to happen.
Right.
Just go out there. And I guess the third is, please share your stories. If you have a story, just even one story that moved you, remember, you can move another, and you might then rekindle that fire within them to reflect. And that is so beautiful. That is that ripple effect. And it is all coming from an open heart. And the more we can open our hearts, the better off we'll be on this planet. And I just want to add a little bonus. I'm very excited about where we are right now. And I think a lot of people would think I'm a nut, but we are at a really pivot point in humanity. And we're on the precipice of this deeper awareness and consciousness than ever before, I think, in modern times. And that, in conjunction with having our scientific research and background, is unique. And I really do think we're really on the edge of something very exciting for humanity and for the planet.
Yes, I pray. I hope so. I'm right there with you. Maureen, tell our listeners how they can get your book and how they can learn more about you. And I know that you are also passionate about feng shui and where they can learn about, the work that you do there as well. So can you share that with us?
Sure. So my book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, basically wherever online books are sold. My website is luminous-spaces.com, and on there you'll find everything about consultations I do and certification training and other resources, my blog and all that, and my podcast.
Awesome. And what is the name of your podcast?
Sure. It's the Enchanted Earth podcast with Maureen Calamia, and it's on YouTube and Spotify and Apple.
Yeah. Perfect. Maureen, thank you so much for being here with us. And I just wanted to point out, just a couple moments ago, you talked about allowing those stories to move you. And I want to just bring your own words back to you, because you said that that's when you realize the importance of this book, right? Having felt the renewed sense of obligation to get it published and into the hands of others. I realize that if I can assist in moving others in any way, that is my goal. And that is exactly what my purpose is. So thank you for sharing this with us. And thank you for your purpose and your mission, as it allows us to reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with the earth, and again, move into this evolutionary space that's right before us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle.
Thanks. And with that, everyone, we look forward to having you join us for the next episode of True Wellness with Dr. D. This is Dr. D, reminding you to tune into your body, reconnect with what matters, and embrace the journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you next Thursday for the next episode drop.